Welcome back, sci-fi fans, to another episode of the Science Fictionary podcast on YouTube. It's not actually the podcast,
Yeah, it's
but
true.
it's kind of the podcast, but
The podcast, the YouTube show.
something like that. But we're going to talk about some Hawkeye tonight.
Yep.
We got a little behind, so I'm glad to catch up. We got 3 episodes to kind of cover.
First off, I just want to say, I think it speaks to the quality of Hawkeye that chronologically the next thing we should talk about in the MCU is Eternals, but instead of doing that, we're talking about Hawkeye. Because personally, I mean, I'm loving the show. I don't know about you guys.
Yep.
Oh, no, I'm absolutely loving it. And I will probably, I'm kind of expecting to get some dirty looks tonight when I say that this so far might be my favorite MCU series.
I think overall,
You guys are crazy.
it depends. I don't know.
No, y'all crazy.
My favorite thing in the MCU series so far has been those first couple episodes of WandaVision that were just weird. I like those episodes more, but as a whole, this is looking like it has a very good shot of being my favorite MCU show.
That's fair.
I love the more grounded, kind of street level stuff we got going on.
Yeah, it kind of feels like one of the Netflix shows from
It does.
2015, especially the action, which makes me even more excited for like Daredevil to be reintroduced, and we'll get a Daredevil show like this. I think that'd be awesome. But we'll get into all that.
And we'll see. We'll see who shows up, and that's one of the things we'll talk about tonight is who we think 3 episodes in, who we think is going to show up by the time this is over with. It's only 6 episodes, right?
I thought it was 8.
Is it 8?
I don't.
6?
It's one of those. I'm happy with either.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those, whenever we would talk about, I was 6 episodes. Okay.
Wow.
I mean, I was real excited about Loki. I was real excited about WandaVision kind of as it started to get close, but like, Hawkeye was one, we would talk about like what's coming up and it'd be like, and Hawkeye, and I was like, yeah, whatever, but it's kind of surpassing expectations.
It is. It's doing everything I wanted out of a Hawkeye show, which is why I really like it. So far, it is a amazing adaptation of the Hawkeye series from like 2012, 13-ish by Matt Fraction, which everybody knew this was going to kind of be based off of because literally like they stole the logo from the book. Like everyone knew it was going to be based off of that, but the Hawkeye in the comics is very different from the character in the movies. So a big question was like, how are they going to adapt this story? Because the story in the comics is about a single Hawkeye living in a crappy apartment and stuff.
Wow.
But they've done a great job adapting those story elements and putting them into this. And there's a lot of like really comic booky stuff in this, like the tracksuit mafia, and they all say, bro. That's straight out of the comic book.
Right.
100%. Pizza Dog, straight out of the comic book. That car chase scene in like episode 3, straight out of the comic book. Even the stuff where she's like talking about the trick arrows and she's like, what's the point of this? And then she makes like all of it is straight out of the book. So it's a great adaptation.
It's kind of unusual, isn't it, for the MCU?
Well, I mean, they actually brought Matt Fraction on as an advisor on this, right?
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's now that you mentioned, I do remember seeing that, which makes perfect sense. Matt Fraction's a great comic book writer, and that is the best Hawkeye story. Like everyone agrees, it's the best one.
Right.
And it's been a great adaptation. So,
but not just him. I'm really, really liking Kate Bishop.
Yes.
Me too.
She's been a lot of fun.
In fact, of the new young characters, this is by far the best introduction they've done for one of these new young characters.
I mean, she's really the only one who's been fleshed out, really. I mean, they fleshed out the twins a little bit, but not very much.
Yeah,
I mean, we saw them a few times, but like as far as really interacting with them, not a whole lot. And we just briefly like glimpsed what Elijah Bradley and some of the others that are probably going to be part of the crew, but she's definitely the one that we've actually spent a little bit of time with. And she's fun. She's great.
She's great, and Haley Steinfeld is doing a great job. I get the feeling that if it was a lesser actress, a lot of these scenes I would cringe at with her. Like a lot of her lines and her delivery and stuff like that. If it was a worse actress, I would not like Kate Bishop. But because Haley Steinfeld's doing such a great job, it makes me like Kate Bishop even more.
Right.
Yep.
And there's a lot to like about her. They did a great. One of my favorite things. The second I knew I was gonna love this show, is when they start it and you get her entire backstory, motivation, everything in like 5 minutes.
Right.
Include not just like the flashback of like cutting back to the Avengers movie, which was awesome, but then the opening credits of that like animation.
Yeah.
That was awesome, and then I got it 100%, and it's established like. It makes it believable that she could be this talented of a fighter and an archer and martial artist because she's been doing it since she was like 7 or whatever.
And it's not just that she did it randomly; it was done with purpose.
With purpose, and she did so much of it all the time that it makes perfect sense that she could hold her own in this situation.
Right.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I do think they did that well, and we'll get into this in a second when we talk episode 1, but. You know, they could have overdone it. They could have had her come in and just really kind of done it the way that you expect Hollywood to do things right now. And she could have been better than Hawkeye.
Right.
Like, she could have been, you know, off the charts good at everything she did, but she's still learning. Like, she has these skills, and Hawkeye's there to help her transition into doing something with those skills.
Yeah.
But she's still, when she gets in a fight with, you know, a bunch of guys, mafia, you know, she needed a little help. And they didn't have her just kick everybody's ass.
Yeah.
She's most certainly not a Mary Sue.
No.
No. And that's what I'm saying. I think they did a really good job of finding balance. Where she is... You understand she is good at fighting. She is good at shooting the bow, but she's not too good yet. And so we get to see her grow as a character and in her abilities, and we get to see Hawkeye mentor her,
Which is perfect because we haven't really gotten to see him be a parent very much.
right?
And
But that's the thing. He's always kind of been the dad in the Avengers, right?
right.
Literally
Like-
the one with kids.
Right, but I mean, you go back to, like, you know, how Wanda steps up and becomes an Avenger. You know, that little speech he gives her, you know, in that room during Age of Ultron.
Yep. And, you know, and there is something like kind of being... I kept the last movie I was working on. I kept, you know, the people be like, oh, you know, well, have some water, you know, like you find yourself sort of like parenting all the time. Once you are a parent, it's kind of one of those things you don't really turn off. I've kind of found, and I feel like he's got a little bit of that going on. It's one of those things like, even though when his kids aren't there, he's still kind of like, you know, making the like parent speeches and doing the,
Right.
you know, it's very believable, especially kind
Well, I
of
think it's just believable that that's who he is sort of in real life.
right. Yeah.
And, you know, and there was the article that came out when the week the series launched where he almost walked away from playing Hawkeye because of the schedule and it taking too much time away from his kids.
Yep.
So, you know, I think some of that is just Jeremy Renner bleeding through into the character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's back up and just start at the beginning. Talk about episode 1, which is, you know, I think episode 2 overall is probably the better episode of the first 2. But episode 1, I think, was a really, really good introduction to a couple of things. One, this kind of post-Endgame world. Maybe it's a little bit different look at a post-Endgame world than we've gotten so far. Where we're looking at more of the lives of ordinary people.
Right.
Which we haven't done. And then we get a really, really great introduction to our new character. But just taking that first episode by itself, what did y'all think?
I think it was
Oh, go ahead.
okay. I think it was a really great introduction, and I love what they did, dropping the first 2 episodes together. Because at the end of episode 1, I'm just dying to see episode 2. I think it set up a lot of great intrigue and mystery of what's going on. I think there's definitely still a lot of twists to come. I don't think everything is as it seems. Like I said, it set up Kate Bishop really well with her motivations and her skills, making her 100% believable that she's able to do all this stuff. I love the scene, like one of the first scenes in the show when she is like shooting at the bell tower, because you go through that opening credit scene and you kind of get the feeling that she's like very strict and very disciplined. And I would imagine someone coming away from that thinking this is a person who doesn't know how to have fun, because all she's focused on is like almost like a Batman thing, where all she's focused on is the mission, and her whole life she's been training for that. But no, she's not like that at all. She likes to have fun. She gets in trouble. She likes to prove her skill, and I really enjoyed that a lot. That little aspect of it.
She's very believable as a 20-year-old.
I think she's like 22. They say.
Okay, so I mean, she's very believable as like a college age. You know, I don't know about other people, but me at 22, oh man, I knew everything, and you know, like. There's just something about being young. We're like, yeah, sure, I can totally do this thing. There won't be any adverse consequences from, shooting the bell tower. It's going to be such a riot, right?
It's be so cool.
It'll be so fun. This is going to be so, and I think that sometimes with kind of superhero characters, like I never felt like they talked about Wanda like, oh, she's just a kid, and like, but she never came off that way at all. She never came off as a teenager. When we saw her, she I mean, she could have just as easily been 30 as 18 whenever we met her. But Kate Bishop, I feel, is very believable as being a college student, being young, and and she. What is it that he tells her, or maybe her mom tells her, basically, you've always been young and you've always been rich.
Yeah.
So I think there's also something to that, kind of having kind of grown up in a world where she's kind of always at the top of the totem pole. She just sort of feels invincible, and she acts exactly like a 20-year-old who has every reason to feel themselves invincible would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Nick is mentioning here what I wanted to talk about. Not just that we did another perspective of the Battle of New York. And we actually get a few little key points, like the fact that we see Stark Tower, but at that point, only one of the letters is missing. And it gives you this idea because, that fight sequence from Avengers, it takes place so quickly. Things happen so fast. But it's still stretched out over 30 minutes of the movie. But she's seeing it at a moment where only one letter is missing, which kind of shows you how fast this really happened to ordinary people. And, I mean, was always probably one of Hawkeye's coolest shots in the MCU. Him, fighting the Chitauri and jumping off that tower. But I absolutely love the new perspective on that shot.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, what a fun thing that must have been to go back and, do more, shots on a movie that's been out for 10 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty cool thing. It's like, it almost reminds me a little bit of, Elijah Wood, whenever they did The Hobbit, and he, they went and shot some footage at Bag End, and he was like, I didn't think I was ever going to do, I didn't think I would ever be here again. I didn't think. And so it kind of made me feel like that just a little bit.
Yeah.
That kind of sort of callback. And, those of us who've been watching for years, you're like, oh, look, it's that thing that I saw those years ago. So, then there's the nostalgia aspect, which, I mean, the MCU is kind of killing the nostalgia aspect right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things. It's so built into one, because especially with one like this, where they're taking one of everyone's favorite runs of a comic book,
Right.
and even though the character is a very different Hawkeye than the Hawkeye in that comic, they're still really doing a lot to bring that comic to life.
Yep.
And so when you do that, you get some level of built-in nostalgia.
Right.
You know, it's like when you make a Captain America movie and you keep him true to the original Captain America. When you make that first Avenger movie and it's Captain America, it's built-in nostalgia.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I really love all that. What did y'all think about Cap? Is it Cap the musical?
Oh
Yeah.
my
It was
gosh.
called. I think it was called Rogers.
Rogers,
Yes,
that's it. Rogers the musical.
Rogers the Beast.
Which
Y'all,
they already said is very intentionally it's this idea the director was talking about, and he said no. They said, somebody asked him, did Hamilton exist in this world, or is this like this world's version of Hamilton? And he said no, Hamilton exists in this world, and this was definitely a ripoff.
Yeah.
I
It's
love
like
it.
a post-blip ripoff of
Yeah.
Hamilton.
So the thing is, like now, like clearly we've got to get him, Rogers the musical on Disney Plus, right?
Well, okay, so
This has
that's what I
gotta be a
wanted to
thing.
ask y'all. Where does this show up? Does it show up on Disney Plus? Do they do a full musical and it shows up on Disney Plus? Or does this become a new thing in the park?
Ooh,
There it is. Avengers Campus.
yep,
There it is. That's a great idea.
that is a great idea.
I mean, honestly, I think that's where that's going.
Yeah,
I
Is
think
that it's-
though at least actually that one song we saw, the I can do this all day. That was awesome.
so
We'll
I
get
mean,
that at least one song.
Yeah.
I mean, Lin-Manuel Miranda has been doing some things with Disney. So, like, what a perfect world it would be if he writes Rogers the musical. Like, please, this is what I need. This is what the universe needs right now. Is Lin-Manuel Miranda to write Rogers the musical,
Yeah.
Yeah,
coming
no,
to you
I love-
soon on Disney Plus and in Disney parks near you.
It's a great idea. I loved the idea of it so much because that would totally exist, 100%. I love, and this is the introduction to a really cool aspect of the show, Hawkeye's hearing aid. I love that a lot because that's out of the comics. Hawkeye is deaf and has a hearing aid, and it sets up some really funny and interesting scenes later, where his hearing aid. Yeah, the PTSD didn't play is great, but when his hearing aid like breaks later and he has to deal with that, but then also the funny parts where he just turns it off on purpose. I think that's really really funny because I imagine he would do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved in the play when he sees Nat and it just
Yeah.
got him. But then I love his reaction to it where that's what's bothering him. But then when his daughter notices, which by the way, I love his daughter. I want to see more of her
Yeah.
because I think their dynamics a lot of fun. When she knows like, oh, it's Nat's bothering you, huh? And he like plays it off as like, no, it's just I was there. You know who wasn't there though? That guy, Ant-Man there, which I
Right.
thought was
Right.
so funny.
We've gotten quite a few Ant-Man references.
Yeah, we got the Pym era later.
Yeah.
was
So we'll
just
definitely talk about some more of
Freaking
that. But
Dope.
Oh,
did
it
not
really
expect
is.
That. It was so cool. But yeah, no, that was a great sequence, and it sets up like they're in New York for Christmas, just celebrating, and it was so fun.
And the thing is that I feel like they did so well in this series. So kind of at risk of making another Hamilton reference. Have you heard Lin-Manuel Miranda talk about writing, like not throwing away my shot, right? Like just writing it and rewriting it to like make it more and more concise, say more of what he wanted to do. And I feel like that's sort of how a lot of the sequences in this movie are. They managed to, instead of just like having the like it's the Rogers the musical moment, but no, it's like they introduce the fact that he's deaf and the fact that he's traumatized and the fact that his dynamics with his daughter, like they managed to sort of loop so many things into this one sequence. And I feel like that's really masterful writing. And the same thing with the Battle of New York. You know, they managed to loop in like how she feels about her dad, why she feels the way she does about Hawkeye, why she decides to take, you know, the archery as her thing. Like they did such a great job, and things that could have just sort of been just sort of this gratuitous stretched out thing just to take up time. But in the process managed to tell us so many things that we needed to know right together, and that's good writing, man.
And they've done that throughout. They've done that throughout
Absolutely.
because they did that with picking up where is Hawkeye at. And I love where she asks him. I don't remember if it's in episode 1 or 2 where Kate Bishop asks him about the hearing aid. You know how he lost his hearing. He's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
and it flashes back to all the explosions and crashing through walls and windows and
Yeah.
you know, it works. I mean, because obviously that's something from the comic book that they wanted to incorporate here. So it makes sense. Like, it's not just forced. It works with the character that there would have been some hearing damage. Thank you, Nick. Nick says that is episode 2. At this point, having watched all 3 before we got started here, I'm sure I'm going to get some of what happened in each episode.
Which episode?
Blending together a little
especially
bit.
when you watch the first 2 in one sitting. That makes it even more difficult to kind of like sort it in your mind.
So let's talk about a couple of other characters here and kind of the big inciting moment of episode 1, which is obviously the death of Armand Duquesne. So we have that. We have Jack. What do y'all think about Jack?
He tried to give me a butterscotch.
Right. Yeah, I don't know the thing about Jack yet. I think it's almost too obvious for him to be a bad guy.
I mean, I think that there's a good chance that Jack is a bad guy. Although I think he's been both in the comics, right? He's been a good guy and a bad guy in the comics? Or has he always been a bad guy?
He looks like the Green Arrow. Like, doesn't he look just like the Green Arrow comics character? Like with the mustache and the pointy beard and the...
So I actually have a theory on Jack that I do think he's a villain, but I don't think he's the villain we think he is.
Yeah, I agree. He's been kind of like a hero and a villain. It's kind of both. I think isn't his comic book character isn't he the guy who trains Hawkeye in the circus?
He
or
is.
Something?
He is. He's the
swordsman. The swordsman,
swordsman,
right? Yeah, he's been kind of good guy, bad guy.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I agree with you. I think he's not good, but I don't think he's the villain we think he is. In fact, I bet what's going on is Kate Bishop's mom is the villain.
I think her dad was. Because especially when she said something about my dad was always only ever out to help people, and I was like,
What if he was?
Okay, so
I'm skeptical.
the mom had vanished for a moment during the Battle of New York. Was out of the house or somewhere hidden. Kate couldn't find her.
That whole sequence was really weird.
The whole sequence is really weird, and I think it also calls into question whether her father's actually dead.
It does.
Because it's awfully convenient that they're obviously in some sort of money trouble.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And his disappearance makes it all go away.
Yeah.
It's... So I do think that's awfully convenient. But I also think that Jack, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here to a scene from episode 3, the scene where Echo sees
the uncle
sees Hawkeye kill her father.
Yeah.
I think that's the swordsman. I think that's Jack.
Really? You think? But we saw it was Ronin, right?
Through a window. It's kind of blurry.
Okay. So what if it wasn't?
But I'm wondering if he had an issue with someone. I think they're underworld. I think they're caught up in the crime family stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that he used Ronin as a way to attack the tracksuits without any... And put the blame on Ronin.
Yeah, because that's why they're kind of that would make sense of why whenever Hawkeye's talking with his wife, they kind of just talk about him like they're annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They're an annoyance. They won't leave him alone, almost like he didn't do it.
Yeah.
Because he never outright says Ronan killed this person, or like this is what's going. It's there's some weird wording around it all. So that's a great theory. I
Well,
think.
I think it's a good theory. It's going to depend on how they want to play this thing out between Hawkeye and Echo. Echo, who is not a villain in the comics, really, and I don't think is going to remain a villain here. So she's got to have some reason for a turn. And I think the most likely reason for a turn is that
It wasn't Ronan.
it wasn't Ronan at all.
Yep. She discovers that somebody she trusts, most likely the uncle.
Yeah, and there's this scene in episode 3 where she's at the like karate meet, and she's talking with her dad, who's in his tracksuit, and then he walks away, and then there's somebody comes and puts a hand on her shoulder.
Yeah.
And my first thought was, oh, is that Kingpin? Like Kingpin has this invested interest in her and has for a while. But now that I'm thinking about it, what if that's Jack? Who was there, sort of. I don't know. It might mean nothing. It might mean nothing. But we saw a man with a suit on put his hand on her shoulder. So I would imagine that's got to be somebody. We're gonna find out who that was, and it's either Kingpin, who like has invested interest in her and has been working with her and like has ties to the Tracksuit Mafia and knew that there was potential there for Echo to be like a high level assassin for him or whatever, or it could be Jack. Jack actually was was training her. I think that'd be really, really cool.
Yeah. So I don't want Kingpin to kind of become the Mephisto of this series.
Yeah.
And that we're looking for Kingpin around every corner. But Vincent D'Onofrio is teasing people.
He's definitely going to be in this show.
He's going to show up. It may be in the end credit of the last episode.
Yeah.
But we're going to establish Kingpin as the big player in the background here.
Yeah, I think there's actually a thing where Kate and Hawkeye are talking when they're walking the dog in the park, and it's like, oh, who's their boss or something like that, and then he mentions like that's a guy. It's a guy you don't want to mess with.
Right.
I think he's definitely talking about Kingpin.
Oh, I do too.
Which is really cool. I think they'll establish like why isn't Kingpin dead? Because I bet Kingpin got snapped, and that's why Ronan didn't stab him while during that 5 years. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and there's gonna be a lot of misdirection, and that's what I really like about it. I think it's too obvious that Jack killed his uncle.
Yeah, I think Jack is definitely a red herring. I don't know what his ultimate role is, and maybe he steps up as a bigger villain by the end, but I think Jack is there to throw us off. He's way too obvious.
He's way too obvious, and I genuinely don't know what his intentions are. I have one problem with the show, and it's the interactions between Kate, her mom, and Jack. It doesn't ever feel natural to me. It feels it falls into that problem I have with a lot of shows where people just aren't talking like human beings to each other.
I think that's the problem, and I think it's intentional that Jack is kind of all over the place. He's going to be Mr. Super Stepdad, right? And so he's just awkward.
He bought a book.
Right, he bought a book. So he's just like he's awkward in his overconfidence.
Right. And I guess I can buy from Kate. Kate not really knowing what to say to her mom about it. But their interactions are just really, really not weird in a good way. Some of it's kind of like, it just felt off to me, like, especially when you involve the mom in it. And it's like, how about someone just have a conversation with each other? But it's
like,
not that big of a deal. It's not ruining the show for me. It was just a little nitpick I had.
And I think you're right there. That's kind of like a chronic issue, just creating drama in TV shows. Like, so often I'll be watching things, I'm like, people don't really just not ever say what they're thinking just to create drama, right?
I also don't like how Kate's act. Like, I get it, and I get some kids probably do act like this when their parents move on after a divorce or after the death of a parent, and their mom or dad moves on. Yes, he's very creepy stepdad, and a lot of kids react to get really angry. I've never had that problem. So I guess I just can't relate to it. but she is being such a jerk to her mom about, like, in episode 1, she's being such a jerk to her mom about this Jack thing, and she just makes this disgusted face all the time, like, and it's like, how about you just like say what you're thinking, Kate? How about that? If it's such a freaking problem with you, I also just think she's being unfair. Now, of course, with like the eyes of a viewer, I know there's something really shady going on with Jack.
Yeah.
And Kate probably knew that a little bit too. Mm-hmm. But
I mean, she also shows up though, and they're engaged. It's not like, hey, this is my friend Jack. This is my boyfriend Jack. Yeah. Oh, hey, we're getting married. It's just like, hey, you showed up, and I didn't tell you I was getting married again.
Right. Well, she also discovers Jack pretty quickly at a secret
auction for
selling stolen materials from Stark Tower.
Yeah.
So,
or that, I think it was the Avengers.
Oh, the Avengers.
Avengers
facility that blew up and everything. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, so like I can kind of see that one from both sides. It's like on the one hand, it's like give her a break. Like it's been 10 years. But on the other hand, like if I showed up and my mom were just like, hey, I got married this weekend, I would be pissed.
Now that I think about it, I'm like, that's really weird. Is he trying to like marry you for your money or something? Like, what's going on here?
Right.
Yeah.
But then then later they're at the party, which I love the little character detail that. Trying to get us back on track here. Talking about episode 1. I love the character detail of her mom telling her to put on the red dress in her room, and she shows up in a black tuxedo. I think that was great. And we're at this auction, or at this party, and she overhears what sounds like Jack's uncle threatening her mom. Mm-hmm. Which is a part where I actually liked them. Kate being like, "Hey, Mom, did he just threaten you? What's going on?" So then she follows Jack's uncle, and then she discovers this secret auction. And I thought that was a really cool concept, the auction, because I definitely buy that. That sets up a lot of things too. We understand that Jack is having money troubles apparently, because he goes to bet on the sword, and his uncle is like, "What are you doing? You can't afford that. I know you can't afford that." So that sets up a lot. And like I said, I love the concept. I like Kate kind of making her way through as a waiter, which they set up earlier really well when Jack's uncle mistakes her for a waitress. So that was a great setup and then punchline. And then she talks about Gary. Like, I thought that was really funny, really smart. And I love that whole little sequence. And then, the Russian mafia guys break in. It's like, what's going on there? Who asked the bro guys, the tracksuit mafia, to break into this thing? Is it Kingpin who orchestrated that? I don't know.
Right, and it's all about a watch.
Yeah, and they want this watch. It's what's going on with this watch. Where did the watch end up at this point?
The dog took it, and we haven't seen it again. We haven't seen it since the dog ran off.
So I guess Kate has it.
Theoretically, I don't
guess.
We were taken out of that. Like, we see the dog run off with it. She saves the dog from traffic, and we haven't seen the watch since.
So I guess Kate has it.
I guess so.
Yeah.
So that's going to come up at some point, and I don't even have any reasonable speculation on what that watch is.
I don't either. Like, a lot of times I have, like, a theory. Like, oh, I bet this is a something. But that one is just...
Did we see the watch?
Yes.
Is it just a normal-looking watch?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, because for a second, I can't remember what it looks like. I was like, oh, is it one of the watches they used when they were going back in time? Like, a watch, but it was just a thing on their wrist? But no,
I think it's a normal watch. If I had to guess, just looking at the watch... From what I recall of it, it's a men's watch, and it looks like something Banner or Tony would wear.
Okay.
I don't think Thor wears watches.
I mean, watches. Like, I'm trying to think. Have we? The only thing I ever remember seeing is in the in the Hulk movie. He has like a heart rate monitor that he wears.
But there's got to be some reason someone wants this, and I'm assuming it's I'm assuming it's some kind of piece of Stark tech connected to
Yeah.
something.
Like his glasses, he has a watch. I feel like Captain America had a watch, but I don't think anything was important about it. Like, I don't know.
Or it could be a piece of Pym tech and it's got something shrunk in it.
Maybe. Or maybe it's just an expensive, valuable watch that the Tracksuit Mafia was trying to get because they can make money off of it. Or maybe it's part of a mystery where it's like some kind of you need the watch to open a safe or something. Like
It's got some kind of key.
possibilities. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of possibilities. But yeah, in this auction, we see Kate suit up as Ronin because the Tracksuit Mafia attacks, and she puts on the Ronin suit and goes superheroing. And at first, I didn't get it. I was like, why are you doing that though? What's your motivation for doing that? Like, why do you want to stop these guys at all? Why do you care? Like, why not just get out of there? But then as the show goes on, I realize, oh, because she really wants to be a superhero.
Yeah.
That's her whole thing, is she really wants to be a superhero, and this is a chance to do it. And so she puts on the Ronin costume, which turns out to be a big mistake. And has a really cool action sequence in this like sort of like wine cellar that I really liked. And things occur. We see Jack pick up Ronin's sword, which of course we are then led to assume later that he used it to kill his uncle. We're led to assume that. I don't know if that's the case.
Right.
And yeah, Pizza Dog takes the watch. He runs away. Kate saves him. They go back to her apartment, which I love the fact that she has this really crappy apartment, by the way, even though she's rich, because I feel like that is her being like, what can I afford on my own? This, okay, right. I'm having it. I want my own apartment. Even though it's crappy and I could go live in this super rich fancy penthouse, I want to live on my own, because that's what I'm doing right now. I have no reason to not live with my mom, except that I want to live on my own, just to prove that I can do it. Yeah. So I feel like that's what she's doing.
Yeah.
Tracksuit Mafia follows her back.
Which is also another one of those growing up things we were talking about earlier.
Right, yeah. And, yeah, so then what happens? She goes back out.
Yeah, she goes to try to find out what, is it Armand Duquesne?
Armand, yeah.
Armand?
Yeah.
She goes to follow him home, basically.
Yeah. See what's going on.
Finds him dead. Runs away and is followed by the Tracksuit Mafia.
Yeah. She gets in a bad situation. She gets stuck in a car. And then we see bad guys getting beat up. And for a split second, I knew it was Hawkeye. But for a second, I was like, wouldn't it be so cool if this was Daredevil? Wouldn't it be so cool if it's Daredevil beating up these guys? Because he just saw that she was in trouble. I missed the part there where Ronin is captured on camera. And then Hawkeye sees it on the news. Then he's like, gotta go deal with this, I guess.
Right.
He just has this real put upon thing. The whole thing is like, you stupid kids keep making messes that I've got to clean up. Which is really what kind of
gives it some Die Hard vibes. That he's just like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
He's just trying to make it home for Christmas.
Right.
Which I think is great, because that sets up, that's the stakes of the show. The big tension of the show is Hawkeye gonna make it home for Christmas?
Yep.
And I don't know. And I really want him to. Like, I care a lot about him making sure that he gets home for Christmas.
Well, and they really made you care when his son calls him in episode 3.
Oh, yeah. That was a great scene.
Yeah. So really well done. And again, lots of things going on there. It's not just the kid calling and putting the guilt on daddy for not being back. It's also the like, well, I know you're doing important things, so kind of gives you a little more dynamics for how his kids feel about what he does. And then gives Kate an opportunity for him to be vulnerable and for her to help him, which I think is also going to be an important thing for their dynamic going forward,
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to admit, there was a part of me that when Hawkeye shows up, I'm like, I know it's Hawkeye, but like, why couldn't it be Daredevil?
That'd be so
Yeah.
It was like,
cool.
if that was all we saw of Daredevil in this, is like Daredevil shows up, beats up the bad guys, and runs off, and Hawkeye shows
Right.
up just in time to be like, who the hell was that?
Yeah.
Yeah, or like, I would imagine exactly. Like, who was that? Or I imagine a thing where like Daredevil beats up the bad guys, runs off. We never even see him, right? We just see that these guys get beat up. Kate gets out the car. She's like, "Okay, cool." Then Hawkeye shows up, and Hawkeye's like, "Oh, great job taking down these guys." And she's like, "What? I didn't do it." And Hawkeye's like, "Well, who did?"
Yeah.
That's it.
Bum,
That would
bum.
be so cool.
Um,
But it was Hawkeye, and that's okay. That's all right. We'll get
Yeah.
Daredevil and Spider-Man, so it's
We
fine.
will. And I don't need him in this, but I want some acknowledgement that he's around.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean,
of course, if Kingpin shows up, that's acknowledgement enough.
or
Right.
like, let's do some kind of like, wouldn't it be so cool if like they just pass a building that says Nelson and Murdoch, attorneys at law,
yeah.
or something? That'd be great.
I just really am ready for
Or
them
a
to start
park bench.
sprinkling some of those things in there.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm curious. So Nick threw out that the Watch might be Daredevil's. Is there like some specific story about Daredevil and a watch?
Not that I mean, there could be, but I don't know if this is all stuff from the Avengers compound. So they would have a lot of. They'd have to do a lot of.
You have to stretch it a little bit. It did say Avengers Compound on the label, didn't it?
Yeah, all of everything in the auction came from the Avengers compound. So
Okay.
they would have to go back and like establish that everybody already knew
Con.
who Daredevil was.
Yeah.
And then explain why he wasn't at the
Anyway.
final battle. And so I'm more
That's
prone
a
to
lot
think
radic-
that
a
it's
lot of
gonna
retcon.
and be. I'm at this point, I'm convinced that it's probably just a piece of Stark tech.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever even hear about it again, but maybe there's more to it. I don't know.
Maybe it's got a flux capacitor in it.
Right. It's one of those things that seemed like there must have been some reason they showed us that watch. But at the same time, like,
It could just be a MacGuffin.
well, it wouldn't be a MacGuffin unless we revisited it.
That's what I'm saying. It may just show up and it may just be recurring. Where's the watch?
I don't know. I think the longer they keep coming back, if they come back to the watch, then it's something significant.
But somebody said something about it in episode 3, didn't they, about the watch? Oh, what were they looking for? What were they after?
Yeah.
I don't know what they were after, but we know. So, which makes me feel like they're going to revisit it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump forward to episode 2.
Yeah, so episode 2, I don't know. I think it's maybe my least favorite episode of the 3 we saw, because this is the one with all the LARPing in it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I got a kick out of
Look,
the.
I
We
got a
could,
kick out of it. And this is a guy, I go to Renaissance festivals religiously. I like take road trips to go to them. I love dressing up. I love the LARPing. I love all of that. I have mixed feelings about the whole LARPing sequence. I think it was cute, but I think it was super unnecessary.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it was necessary to the story at all.
No.
I think the only thing it serves is that we actually see, as much as he's trying not to have fun, that he's winds up, he's definitely having a little bit of fun before it's over with there.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
and so I like the idea that this is a group of mostly first responders, firemen, police officers, and real life heroes, and that he can kind of be there with them. And I honestly won't be surprised at all if that's something we revisit somewhere down the road.
If they all show up, all the LARP people show up with some.
Or that we find out that, like, this is now, like, if Clint is kind of retiring, if that's what we're doing here,
This becomes his hobby.
that he just kind of gets into going and LARPing and just
This is what I want to
hanging
see him
out
doing
with
the
these
weekend.
other guys.
And he just becomes the greatest LARPer of all time.
So I didn't mind it. I like what it kind of does, where the character lets his guard down for a minute. But you're right; it's not totally necessary to have added that for him to track down the.
Like, it would have been. I think it went on a little too long,
Yeah,
but still, I mean, it's fine. Other than that, I still liked the episode.
Yeah. And I do feel like, so I feel like Nick brings up a really good point about Ronan specifically, that he was that his wife knows about Ronan, because I kind of thought when they had trailers, it kind of looked like they might be separated. In some of the initial trailers, and I was like, so like, did she leave him when she found out about Ronan when she got back, and I kind of wondered for a little while if this is something he hadn't told her, if he was, just trying to kind of keep that under wraps from her.
Right.
And so I did appreciate that, because they've always had that kind of really honest relationship, and you just see so much dysfunction in relationships, and specifically the longer marriages go on in TV shows, the more dysfunctional they get usually. And so it was really great to see a little bit of, like, people making good decisions.
No, I really liked that moment in this episode where, like, not only is he honest with her about Ronan, like, she's pretty up on all of his and Black Widow's antics through the years.
Yeah.
He's like, well, she's like, what's next? He's like, well, I'm gonna get myself caught. It's like,
one of Nat's old moves.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. I
Catch
do
and
love how
release,
he's
yeah.
not. I think I'd be annoyed if he was like lying to her, like, yeah, I'm just taking care of something. I just, I can't get my plane tickets. They're not. The airport's messing it up. I'm sorry, babe. I'll be home tomorrow. I hate that. I would hate that. I like how he's like, yeah, I gotta do this now. He's just like fully honest with her about everything, and she knows that this is freaking Hawkeye. Like, he can take care of himself,
Right.
and it's just great. I love the dynamic. When she wasn't in episode one, well, she was in episode one, but like at first she wasn't. Like when she wasn't with the family, I got really upset. I was like, oh, did Linda Cardellini not want to come do the show? That sucks, because I'm in love with her. So, freaks and geeks. So whenever she did, like, they had the call, and then she was there, like, oh, awesome, great, she's in the show. And yeah, I really like their dynamic, and how he's fully honest with her about everything. It's great.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about. We're like, oh, look, they're having a conversation with each other. That's nice.
Because I feel like it's a really worn out shtick in these movies where the hero's got to lie to his significant other. Like, I feel like, honestly, that's what finally killed Green Arrow. It was like, finally, like, just stop. Like,
Arrow.
this,
Yeah.
just over and over and over. Yeah, Arrow.
The other show about a bow and arrow.
The other show about the guy, and it was just like always with the lying and the half truths. Then she'd find out and she'd be mad, and they'd have this thing, or they just yelled, "Will they or won't they? Will they stay together? Will they?" And it was just like, eventually, it just
and not
gets
just that
to
show,
be
but
so.
like it's this running thing, like Spider-Man. Well, you can't have a love interest because you
Right.
put them in danger.
Right.
Or you can't, it's just the comic book trope, and I feel like this stands the whole thing on its head. And I love, all the way back to when we first found out that Clint Barton has a family. It's like Fury set this up for me when I joined Shield.
Right.
So it's this whole thing, like his wife was already with him. Fury set it up to make the family safe. And I love the whole dynamic there, that like, yeah, he gets to have a normal family.
And honestly, and I think it's much more believable if everybody sort of has their own way of coping with this, instead of everybody having the exact same conundrum of, oh, shall I be happy or shall I be a hero, or shall I have a family or shall I be a hero? It's like, obviously that's an issue, but if that's the only thing that any superhero ever does romantically, it just gets old. So it's really refreshing that they've done something a little different, and that they've managed to tell a little bit of a different narrative, because that's life. Everybody's narrative in life is not exactly the same. Different people deal with similar situations in very different ways, and that's just reality. And I feel like it's much better that way.
I agree. So yeah, what else happens in episode 2? LARPing.
LARPing. Really the big thing, it was a little bit shorter in the first episode.
Yeah.
From there, Clint goes and gets himself caught.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kate finds out about it, uses her bishop security to track him, which I really like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That aspect of it, especially when, I think in the next episode she gets locked out of her security login. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then Clint's got his plan. It's going well. Kate wants to play superhero, and she
Right.
crashes through the window.
Right.
And it's a really funny way to end the episode.
Right.
But then we get the reveal of Echo, where
Mm-hmm.
now I didn't see the casting for who Echo was, so I didn't know. But it was really great when he walks into the room and there's just this chick, and he says, "We got them both," and then she stands there and he starts talking in sign language, and I'm like, "Oh, it's Echo! Awesome, cool." That was a great way to end the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't think, I'm looking at her, her credits. They've already announced a spinoff show for her.
Yeah.
And this is her only credit as an actress.
Strange.
And I believe she's actually deaf.
Yeah, she is. Haley Steinfeld and Jeremy Renner learned American Sign Language to actually communicate with her
Interesting.
on set. Yeah.
That's cool.
But they must have seen something from her that they really liked to have already, decided to spin that character off.
Mm-hmm.
But, we get the.
I like the character.
Right. But I love that she falls through the ceiling, lands there. And so the last words, I think, spoken before we see Echo are, bro, I found her.
Right.
I love, they keep saying bro, which is straight out in the comic. They say bro so much. It's hilarious. And I love that they're doing that in the show. Like, bro, I found it, bro. Let's play cards, bro.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, anything else on episode 2?
No, they ended it. They
I
knew
think
that this
episode
one was
1 we did a lot of introduction, and episode
Right.
2 gave us action.
and they did a good job because they knew that this was not being released together with the other one, and they left a good cliffhanger on that one. And they drop, and here they are. They drop in, and now the catch and release just got a lot harder.
Yeah. And episode 2, I think the only other thing I would mention is where she's talking to him about, what your problem is? It's marketing.
Marketing, branding, yeah.
And it's so I think this is going to have an effect on, Hawkeye is her favorite hero. Mm-hmm. But she's also likes the idea of big and flashy, and everybody sees you being the hero.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's like,
And
I'm a
he's
spy.
completely opposite of that. He just wants to do his job and really not be seen.
Right.
That is his job, is to not be seen.
To not be
most
seen.
of the time.
Right, because we forget, while he is an Avenger, he's a spy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First and foremost, he's a spy. And honestly, him staying under the radar is what has kept his family safe all these years.
Right. So I do think that I like that dynamic, and I think that this will play out, and it really will shape what kind of hero. I think it's part of the mentoring as to what kind of hero she will become. Mm-hmm.
That's Katniss Everdeen.
Oh yeah, that
There's
was
some-
funny.
There are some really great lines, and I love how the MCU has quit shying away from just pop culture references. It's like Katniss Everdeen. There's been a couple of others that they've
And Eternals, the Superman thing.
right.
Yes.
They even called him.
That was great.
Right.
That was so great.
DC Comics exists in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so take whatever implications you want from that.
Right. So episode 3, I think they went back. We introduced another new character, and I think they did just like they did with Kate. Gave us a very good introduction to the character without drawing it out for a whole episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of the things, maybe the thing that they're doing the best that has made the pacing of this show better than I think some of the other shows have been, is that when we introduce new people, it's very concise. We get all the information in a really easily digestible way.
Because we spent an entire episode meeting Sylvie and Loki.
Yeah.
An entire episode, and that's all that happened was like, like we saw her, and then there was like backstory, a whole episode of backstory.
Right. So I feel like with this show, they go introduction and then something happens. And this one, I mean, I think the real thing to talk about in this one, of course, I mean, it's the car chase.
Yeah.
Which, as David already talked about, it's right out of the comics. I love the fact that, a lot of times I'm critical of the use of shaky camera footage. The shaky cam, from the moment it kind of became a thing, like some movies did it, and it was amazing. And then everybody tried to imitate it. It's just like all the things everybody tried to imitate out of the Matrix, and nobody ever did it quite as good. And the shaky cam has kind of been that thing.
It was the Blair Witch Project, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
The found footage shaky cam thing, yeah.
Now there were some action movies that were doing the shaky cam, which is kind of more what we're talking about. But I feel like they used it really well, where you're going from the front of the car to the back of the car, and it feels like you're along for this ride. It's not too smooth. I feel like sometimes you do a car chase, and if it's too smooth, I feel like Baby Driver. Have you seen Baby Driver, David?
Yeah, I've seen Baby Driver.
Baby Driver the camera's very steady. They're not using the shaky cam, but what they do to add the same effect of making you feel like you're in the car is using what Edgar Wright is famous for, which is his whip pans. They use those whip pans in the car, and you just kind of get that dizzy feeling of being in the car. And I feel like it really makes you feel like you're there in the action. I think they did it really well in this. Because more often than not, I'm critical of directors deciding to go with that.
Yeah. And no, we're not going to bust the window out of a 73 Challenger.
Right.
It's like, that was the thing. At the end, all of this, it's like they nearly died. He's like, and the Challenger gets wrecked anyway. It's like, oh, look, it's a 40-year-old man.
Yeah.
I mean, that was very believable. It's like, oh, look, it's your dad or it's your
really
brother.
It's really cool that they went and found that car, though, because it's the car from the comic. Like, I mean, it looks exactly like the car in the comic.
Yeah. Except for they actually did take that car in the comic, right?
Yes. So what did y'all think about this episode as a whole? And really, I mean, a huge portion of this episode boils down to the car chase.
Yeah, and then also just the scene before it when they're escaping, the big action scene.
Right.
In the warehouse. I love that it was like...
The ball pit!
The ball pit. I love the
pit.
setting. This show's has some great settings for some fight scenes, which I really enjoy. And
man, the hangout, the tracksuit mafia's hangout is kind of an odd place, right? Like, they've got the coin-operated children's ride-on unicorn, and they've got a ball pit. Store. Like, I'm assuming that, I don't know what the building they're in is.
I think it's an old toy store.
Okay.
Or something like that.
But I love that we open up on them strapped to the riding toys, and they're just really the mafia. They're just putting quarters in the machine and watching them suffer on these rides.
That was great. And then there's that great scene where Kate gives this guy relationship advice.
Right.
That was so funny.
Imagine Dragons.
Oh, he's like, I like Imagine Dragons. That was funny because I freaking hate Imagine Dragons.
I like Imagine Dragons. See?
Oh, you do? Good for you.
But my favorite thing is and quit pretending like you bought them for her. Yeah, you clearly bought those tickets for you.
So there are thousands and thousands of bands, and you choose to listen to Imagine Dragons?
I mean, I don't go out of my way to listen to Imagine Dragons, but if it comes on, then, I jam to a little bit of Radioactive.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, they made one good song 10 years ago. Well, actually,
I'm old,
Very,
David.
I'm being very cynical. Most bands I like made one good song like 30 years ago. So
Huh? See? Yeah.
anyway, that was
They
a
didn't just
great
make one
scene.
good. What was the other one? What's the other one I like?
Oh, I don't know.
It was on a it was on that Assassin's Creed uh Revolutionary War. Anyway,
I don't
they made
remember.
more than one good song, maybe two good songs.
Oh, fine. You know what? That's more good songs than I've made.
True.
So
Or me.
anyway, that was a great scene.
Uh-huh.
And then yeah, the action scene after was just a lot of fun, really cool.
Yeah.
And then the car scene was super cool. Got to see Kate really put her skills to show. A lot of good setup and punch on like the plunger thing. Like, what's the point of the plunger arrow? And then later when they're on the train, she's like, okay, I get the plunger arrow now.
Yeah.
I love the trick arrows.
Right.
That's a lot of fun. And then later, of course, when they're on the bridge, we get that super cool moment where he shoots a Pym arrow at a regular arrow, and it becomes a giant arrow.
Yeah, it
Right.
was great. That was awesome.
No, I love that. That was because I didn't expect that at all.
Me either.
Well, and
And
I
it's like-
love
Like, I wanted more reaction of other people, like, seeing it and seeing this giant arrow appear in the sky.
Yeah, and then what do they do with it after?
Right.
Like,
does
some
it
of them
shrink?
gotta-
Like, does it shrink back down? Or
No,
is there
you
just this
have to
giant
throw a
arrow?
shrinky thing at it. Do they
That's-
call Hank Pym like, "Hey, can you come bring a little shrink thing?" Like, what? I don't know, but yeah, it was super cool. It was
Yeah.
a great moment. I didn't expect.
Well, and they didn't shy away from, some things that were a little bit corny, like the goo, right?
Right.
The ones with like the
The big
it looks
purple goo.
yeah, the big purple goo and the stuff like that, that's like a little bit cheesy, a little bit something that the MCU doesn't typically go in stuff for stuff like that, but it, as long as you do it in moderation, it works.
Was that the putty arrow?
Yeah.
Yeah. Too bad there was no boxing glove arrow, but that's more Green Arrow's thing anyway.
I only wanted, the one that had all the, like, cables that grab all the Christmas trees.
That was
Like, but in keeping with, like, using things from other characters, like the Pym arrow later, and maybe we'll see something like this. May not have even thought of this, but, like, I would have loved that to have been some of Peter Parker's web tech.
Oh, that would have been great.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would have been awesome.
Or the USB ears. What are those for? We've
That's a
seen
good
them,
question.
right? So
I love that she shoots the guy with.
yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to
Like,
see what this arrow does.
And at that point, they've done crazy stuff, so like they're
Right.
actually, it makes sense for them to be afraid. Like, what is this arrow gonna do? I don't know.
Yep, it's a good threat. Just no follow through on it.
Yeah, but the action scene. I mean, honestly, for a TV show, maybe one of the top car chases of all time for a TV show.
Yeah, for a TV show, definitely. It was really fun. Some great camera work. There were some really good shots in this episode. I love the shot of afterwards when they're on the train, and it's just like this still shot and like Kate and Hawkeye, and it's one long shot of like Kate talking to him, and he's like, "You're right," like, and you know that he can't hear her.
Yeah.
They're having the conversation. Yeah,
Yeah, it's super cool, good shots, and a lot of fun. And then in this episode, that's when we have the conversation where he's on the phone with Nathaniel, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Oh yeah, and then they're like on the train. This is when they do the first time they do the thing. I think it might be the first time, maybe the second, maybe they did it at some point in the car chase, where even though Clint can't hear Kate, he ends up saying the same thing she said, which establishes that they're actually thinking a lot of the same things, and they're thinking on the same level. Where she's like, "Oh, we just need to walk the dog. He's been cooped up all day," and then a little bit later, he's like, "Need to walk the dog. He's been cooped up all day."
Yeah, I love at that point that she's, kind of laughing to herself because, she realizes that he didn't hear anything that she was saying
All
to
the
him.
sappy things she's just
All the sappy things she said to him. And then he turns around. But I mean, I love that conversation. Like, there's two conversations that I really love in this episode. And the first is with Nathaniel. And then the second one is that one on the train where, you know, she's just talking about going back and walking the dog. And he's like, you know, you're right, calling yourself one of the world's greatest archers. And, you know, she's over there just about tearing up. And then he starts talking about the dog.
Oh, yeah. It was
good writing
fun.
again.
Yeah.
Great writing. Oh, I'm thinking earlier in the car chase, Kate says this would be a lot easier if we were facing the other way. He doesn't hear her. A couple seconds later, he goes, "This would be a lot easier if we're facing the other way." Like they're thinking on the same level,
Right?
Which they're establishing, and I really like that. So then, what happens? What happens after the Nathaniel conversation?
That's when he goes LARPing, right? No, they get his hearing aid fixed.
They get his hearing aid fixed, and then how does this episode end? Oh, they go to the Bishop penthouse, and they're going to go snoop around to see what Jack's into, and the episode ends with Jack pulling was that the Ronin?
It's the Ronin sword.
That was the Ronin sword, pulling it on Hawkeye.
Yep.
Yeah. Then my kids are going, no! They were so indignant that it was over.
I really hope they don't kill Clint in this show.
Oh, surely they wouldn't.
I
Not
can't
their Christmas
imagine
show.
at this point. I think if we were going to kill Clint, I think we've already passed that point in the MCU.
Yeah, that was Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
That was Age of Ultron, or that was he goes down the soul shaft instead of Nat. Because I mean, it was a total toss up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they keep playing with it. I'm sure they filmed the scene where Clint dies instead.
Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, that's how the episode ends, which was really, really fun.
Yeah, I can't wait to see where this one's going. I'm really enjoying the show. I feel like, and like I said, you know, I feel like at this point, of course, there's still half the season left, and I could certainly change my mind by the time we get to episode 6. But right now, I feel like, even though there's things in WandaVision and Loki that I absolutely love, I also feel like, you know, there was some of watching that and you're going, you kind of get to the end, especially with Loki, you kind of feel like you get to the end and go, I don't know, I know less about where I'm at now than when this started. And I really love Falcon and Winter Soldier. But there were episodes that were not as strong. And I feel like if this continues on its current trajectory, and I feel like with 6 episodes, they can't really let down. Like, you don't get to burn an episode. You don't get to waste an episode. And I feel like where they would have likely wasted episodes would have been on character introductions. And I feel like they moved so fluidly past that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That I really don't expect them to waste an episode. I expect this. I mean, we're fixing to start the second half. I really expect it to really ramp up from here.
Yeah. So far, this is looking like the show that I'm definitely gonna rewatch. In the same way that I rewatch Daredevil, like pretty much every year, I rewatch it at least once. I can see myself rewatching this show a lot, and I don't plan on rewatching Loki or WandaVision or even Falcon Winter Soldier.
Right. No, I fully expect that by the time this one's over, that this gets lumped into my yearly Christmas watching list.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was an accident either, making it.
No, but they've done a really good job with incorporating the Christmas music. And
I love the way that it's coming out. It's gonna end like the last episode's gonna
3
come
days
out,
before Christmas.
3 days, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is super fun.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be watching it. Like it's gonna get me in the Christmas spirit.
Yep. So wait, the last
December 22nd will be the final episode.
December 22nd. Wow.
So,
Yeah. So he's got to make it home for here's the thing. They're dropping this movie 3 days before Christmas. He's got to get home for Christmas, right?
That's the big tension, which is what I love about that's the high stakes. Will Clint make it home for Christmas? Will he get to celebrate Christmas with Nathaniel.
Yeah.
WandaVision's still my favorite, but this is already second. Fair enough. I like WandaVision a lot.
Yeah.
WandaVision, I really, really do. I like those episodes and the concepts, but I don't see myself rewatching WandaVision. I'm definitely going to be rewatching this.
Yeah, there's
I
no
think this
options
one-
about rewatching WandaVision in my house. My children are obsessed.
I just feel like this one's really, really rewatchable, and kind of without the mind bending that goes on in WandaVision and Loki.
And there is something to be said for the stakes are not is he going to break all of time and space? It's is he going to get home for Christmas?
Yeah.
And they've made that just as compelling as is he going to break everything?
Well, that's the thing, and that's what I like about the more street level action, street level stakes, is it reminds me of, particularly of, even though it's much lighter hearted, it reminds me a lot of the Daredevil series.
Yeah.
And even when they introduce Echo, like, you can't tell me you didn't get Daredevil vibes when they walk in that room and it's the red light.
Oh, wow. 100%.
I mean, it's like that was very intentional
I think so.
lighting to light her like something from Daredevil.
Yeah.
Definitely.
This is leading me to believe that we really could get like a Daredevil season 4,
Yeah.
which is on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I firmly believe Daredevil's coming, and if they reintroduce Daredevil, I mean, I would love to see him continue with series. They could do a movie. I don't know. I have no idea what they would do, but
Both.
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 Yeah, I'm fine with both. That's the thing. I don't want there to be this divide in the MCU, and I really don't think that's where they're going, where there are TV-only characters and movie-only characters. I love the idea that, you're in this world, and, I mean, if you can do it in Star Wars, where you're in this huge galaxy and random characters show up all the time, it's like characters we know pop up all the time, then surely when you're in New York, somebody you already know that's also in New York can show up.
Yeah.
It's Marvel, so everybody's in New York.
Right. So
Cap's from Brooklyn, if you didn't know.
Right, in case you missed it.
Yeah, in case.
Spider-Man's is from Queens.
Yeah, at least Spider-Man doesn't always say, like, I'm just a kid from Brooklyn. I mean, I'm just a kid from Queens.
Yeah.
yeah.
He doesn't say that. I love Cap so much. It's just sometimes it's like, I think in Civil War specifically, he mentions that he's from Brooklyn like 4 times.
Yeah, he does. And I think they overdid it there. I do get that it's a huge part of his identity.
I do too. And
I
it's
think
okay.
he's also,
But-
I think, kind of struggling with his identity a little bit there. I mean, that's when he drops his shield. So I feel like he's kind of struggling with, like, and sometimes you kind of, when you start to get old.
Where is Clint from? Do we know? No, we don't.
I don't
Because
think so.
Unlike Cap, it's not important, I guess.
Right. If you're not from New York, who cares?
I want Clint to say, I'm just an archer from Missouri.
Yeah.
Missouri, yes.
So actually the Marvel Cinematic Universe wiki entry says that he's from Iowa.
Oh, okay.
Now, I don't know if that's confirmed or if that's just a carryover from comics or something, but
I don't know. It doesn't matter. I was just kind of joking.
yeah.
But yeah, this is a great show so far.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait to see where it's going.
Yep.
It's still the painful wait a week and see.
We'll live.
We'll live, but I really do actually like the one a week schedule.
It's been really good for Disney Plus.
But
They've been thriving on that.
stuff like this where they keep hitting those, they keep nailing these cliffhanger endings,
Yep.
and so
They're doing
I'm
it.
excited to see where they go. I'm excited to see. I mean, we've only got 3 episodes left, and by all accounts, Kingpin is supposed to be in this, and what's her name from Black Widow?
Oh yeah,
Oh, that's
Yelena.
right, Yelena.
Yelena is one of the top. The actress is one of the top billed actresses on this series.
Yeah, and we haven't even seen. I completely forgot about her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't seen her at all. But she was like, I think I remember. I remember like right after Black Widow came out, like there were reports that she was going to be in every episode.
Yeah, there were, and so I don't know what the story is, but I really kind of expect at this point the action in these last 3 episodes is going to be insane.
Yeah,
I'm basically expecting, at least with the next 2, to have 2 episodes of pretty much nothing but action.
Yeah.
I think we've introduced everybody that needs an introduction, and I think it gets really heavy into that. I mean, there's a ton of action scenes we saw in the trailers we haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
So I think we're fixing to lean real heavy into the action for the next 2 episodes, maybe all 3.
Yep. It's gonna be good. I'm excited.
Yep.
me too.
All right. Well, that's our discussion on the first 3 episodes of Marvel's Hawkeye. Nick, thank you so much for joining us in the chat and contributing to the conversation.
Thanks, Nick.
And we will be back, hopefully for the rest of the series, we will be back every week to do this and talk each episode individually so they don't all run together on us.
Yeah.
But, yeah, until next time, Marisha, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at princesses_and_padawans, and I am P Padawans on Twitter, in theory. Not very much, but you know.
In theory, I like
theory.
that.
All right, and David?
I am David_JG Peoples on Twitter.
All right, and let's see. You can find us on Twitter at sci_fictionary. You can drop us a line at the sciencefictionary@gmail.com. And as always, be sure to visit red5network.com and at red5network on Twitter to find our podcast as well as the rest of the Red 5 podcast family.
That's
Is
it.
there anything else?
And until next time, I can do this all day.
This podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.